Thank you to the IMDb TV original series Alex Rider for sponsoring a portion of this video. Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Elias, and in today's video, I will be recommending some books that I think are truly underrated. So when I asked you guys what other content you'd like to see from me, a lot of you guys said book recommendations, and I was like, alright, well, here I am to deliver. In today's video topic, I'll be recommending and talking about some of my favorite books that I think are underrated, that I think are hidden gems and aren't talked a lot about on BookTube in general. So I have quite a surprising number of books to go over. There are some books in here that I have rated really high, like 5 stars, and other books that I have rated 3 stars, so some variety here. But before we get any further, I would like to take a few minutes to talk about IMDb TV's series Alex Rider, who are also sponsoring this portion of the video. Season 2 of Alex Rider just dropped and it's free to stream on IMDb TV, which you can access on Fire TV, Roku, or anywhere Prime Video is available. It's also based on the Alex Rider book series, which we're also going to be talking about today. So speaking of underrated books, when it comes to being the underdog, Alex Rider truly takes the cake for this one. Why, you may ask? Because honestly, for me, it was one of the first introductory books that I read that combined mystery, political intrigue, thriller, and espionage, which is really cool. If you didn't know what the series was about, it essentially follows this young teenager named Alex who is sort of recruited by MI6 to be a trained spy, and through that he traverses the globe fighting criminals and bad guys, picking up clues and trying to solve mysteries while at the same time trying to save the world and survive, and also building his skills as a trained spy. So I personally remember reading the first 2 books. I remember I was like 15 or 16 and I thought it was just really cool because it was my first time reading about a spy in general. I always saw them in movies and in TV shows, but it was my first time reading all that in a book. Someone who was close to my age that I could sort of relate to, in the sense that I could also do the things that Alex could and be a spy and save the world, because why not? Alright, let's talk about the adaptation real quick. Season 1. So last year, when the season first came out, I sort of stumbled upon it while watching a trailer for it, and I was like, oh, I didn't know they were making a series about it, but I know what the series was about because obviously I read the books. And so I checked out the first episode, and before I knew it, I finished all 8 episodes in one go. It was actually pretty insane, but no regrets. So the first season was actually adapted from the second book, Point Blank. So season 1 follows Alex Rider, who is sort of coerced into the secret organization, also known as MI6, to investigate the mysterious circumstances of these deaths that all tie back to this boarding school, Point Blank, for troubled teens. All the while also trying to figure out who murdered his uncle, Ian Rider. I honestly didn't really know what to expect from the first season. I really loved how dark and intense it was and how they made Alex more human instead of a know-it-all spy from the books. In the show, they made him a little older and more mature. He actually makes mistakes, like there are actual consequences from those mistakes, like he's no Gary Stu whatsoever. Also, when it came to the fight scenes, I really felt it because it felt realistic, like when people are injured, they truly look injured, like the stakes are pretty high. They also made some certain changes in the show by incorporating some of the characters that appeared later in the books, like Jack Starbright and Alex's best friend, Tom Harris. Another really cool aspect about the show that didn't really appear in the books was his relationship with his uncle. In the first book, his uncle is killed off immediately, but in the show, his relationship with his uncle was much more expanded upon, so then you actually feel that connection more so than in the books. So I will be talking some slight spoilers from season 1, so if you want to avoid any spoilers, you can skip to this time frame here on the screen. So there's this one scene in Point Blank that I was anticipating for that I wasn't sure if it was gonna take place in the show. It's a scene where Alex makes an actual makeshift snowboard and uses it to escape the facility and down the mountain. To my surprise, they actually kept that in the show and it did not disappoint. Also, another really cool upgrade from the books is that Alex is portrayed as sort of like a lone wolf, but in the show he actually cooperates with other people, other characters to get things done, which was really refreshing to see. Overall, I do think the show really elevated the books, characters, and stories while still remaining a faithful and true adaptation. Now, for season 2, which is out now, it's actually an adaptation from the 4th book in the series, Eagle Strike. So season 2 sort of picks off where season 1 left off, and we follow Alex as he sort of struggles with the aftermath of what happened from season 1 and trying to return to a semblance of a normal life. However, when a journalist father of his close friend is attacked, he is basically thrust back into the world and life of espionage. After the Pentagon itself is attacked, with the help of Jack and his best friend Tom, Alex must unravel a sinister plot against American defense system while going head-to-head with tech billionaire Damian Gray. So I actually already completed the first episode of the second season, and I'm truly excited to see what comes next because we are already introduced to Sabina, which is his main love interest from the books, which I was not expecting. Again, I only read the first 2 books in the series, so I'm not really too sure what comes after next. So prior before watching the first episode of the newest season, I was sort of curious to see how they would sort of handle the repercussions with Alex as a spy, with him also being so young, just going through all that turmoil and trauma, and not just affecting him, but the people around him as well. Like the whole psychological aspects of it, I think that's just really interesting to me. And already from the first episode, to my surprise, they've actually explored that a little bit, so pretty curious to see how that unfolds later on. I'm also wondering how big Jack Starbright's and Tommy Harris's role will be this season, and also the serious repercussions to problems from season 1, how they'll be explored and solved in this season. So Alex Rider season 2 is out now and free to stream. It's only 8 episodes, easily bingeable, I tell you. Season 2 just launched on December 3rd, so if you haven't caught up or watched the first season, you can still do so. You can stream the show for free on Fire TV, Roku, and anywhere Prime Video is available. Again, you can check out more about Alex Rider in the link below, and thank you once again to IMDb TV for sponsoring this portion of the video. Alright, with that being said, back to our regular broadcast. Alright, so we're just going to go ahead and get straight into this because there are so many books. Alright, first up, this one is a personal favorite, and I remember reading this particular series way back in the day, and I think this is like the closest thing to like fan fiction. Even though it's sort of like a story on its own, to me it still reads as fan fiction, and probably the best kind of fan fiction there is. This series is The Foxhole Court by Nora Sakavic. I also cannot count the amount of times that I have gone through the series over and over again, just reading like little snippets here and there, reading like each book in no particular order. It's not even that good or even well written academically or even analytically. It's just so potent in its characters who really and truly carry the entire trilogy for me. Honestly, if it weren't for these characters, I wouldn't really care about them, but the fact that I am obsessed with these characters, even to this day, truly makes that inevitable statement. I also know that these books have a very small but niche fandom attached to them, and I'm happy to say that I am also part of that fandom. It essentially follows this young boy who is on the run after the death of his mother, running away from basically the mafia, who his dad is part of, and also known as the Butcher. He is running away from a really bad life, so he is trying to run away, stay a step ahead from this bad life, and of course, predictably, it catches up to him. But throughout this whole journey, in order to like blend in and hide, he sort of enrolls himself in the sport that this book series has entirely made up. It essentially is like hockey meets rugby and lacrosse all in one, and through it all, he meets all these different characters, and of course, a boy, a really toxic boy that he falls in love with. And of course, we all love him too, and them together. Honestly, the toxic traits that this book has to offer is truly astounding in a way that I'm like okay with it. I'm just like, the way it portrays and processes mental illness, drug use, trauma, I mean, I pretend not to see it, but also at the same time, you're aware of it, but it's like reading fan fiction, you know? It's like you're reading all the horrible, terrible traits that this book has to offer and still sort of loving it anyway. I'm in no way endorsing what this book series has to offer in terms of like portrayal and representation. I mean, that's pretty much non-existent. Overall, I just honestly had a really fun time reading these. These are almost like comfort reads to me at this point. I read them every year in some form or another, whether it be like a couple pages, a whole book, the entire trilogy, who knows. This is my first recommendation. I can count on like one hand how many people I've seen talk about this book series on BookTube in general. I mean, these are problematic books, I acknowledge that, but these are also one of my favorite books of all time. I mean, they are super trashy, but I love it. I love it. 5 out of 5 for every single one. Alright, so we are moving on to one of the best duologies I've ever read in my entire life. The Fixer Duology by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. The author has also written a really popular series that has been well beloved and well received, and that is the Inheritance trilogy. I've been on book 2 for like how long? 5, 6 years now? And honestly, every year, every chance that I can get, recommend it. I mean, if you take my recommendation seriously, okay? Like, political intrigue with a slight splash and twist of thriller and mystery. I mean, these are kind of perfect, and it's only a duology. However, I truly wish this was a trilogy because there are so many questions I still have for the series in general. The duology primarily follows a young sister who moves to Washington, D.C. to live with her older sister, who is known as the Fixer for all these celebrities and higher political people in power. She basically hides the bones in their closets, but overall, both of them get caught up in like this political conspiracy of assassination and murder and death and mystery, and it's all great. So, highly recommend. This may not seem much, but let me tell you, it's a lot. So the next book I want to recommend is Neverworld Wake by Marisha Pessl. I think so far, the author herself has written only 2 to 3 books in her lifetime yet, and I've only read 2 of them, Night Film and this one. And I gotta say, they're both extremely different. I think if you're coming over from Night Film, which is her adult thriller book, to this, you might be disappointed because you might be expecting sort of the same flair, that same substance that you got from Night Film. However, I feel like these two are extremely, totally different in and of itself. So this one primarily follows a group of college students. Yes, a YA book about a group of college students, a rarity in and of itself. But like I said, this one follows a group of college students who reunite after the death of one of their friends. However, a mysterious stranger knocks on their door and announces that time for them has become stuck. For reasons obviously unknown, and in order to break out of this, they have to make an impossible decision between themselves. And thus begins Neverworld Wake. That is essentially describing the strange phenomenon that is occurring and happening between these friends. I gave this book actually 3 stars, but in my Goodreads review, I said that this book was like a sleeping secret, a dream waiting to happen. Honestly, I'm just really glad that I read it, and I think it's truly one of the most unique books that I've read out there. And the ending for this one was just spectacularly done. So highly recommend for being underrated. Alright, so the next book I want to recommend is Electric Kingdom by David Arnold. I literally have never seen anyone talk about this book except myself. So you know that I think of all the books on this list, this is pretty much the most unknown. This one is uncanny because it primarily follows a group of survivors during an apocalypse surviving a disease that basically wiped the entire world. Basically, I read this during COVID, and while it was sort of like creepy and eerie reading that, like, you know, paralleling what is happening in the real world, I thought it was just the most dreamlike and atmospheric book that I ever read for any YA sci-fi dystopian book ever. I won't say too much about this book because I actually did a whole reading vlog about it, and you can watch that and find all my thoughts about that. I read this book in the beginning of the year and I absolutely loved it. So 4 out of 5 for this one. Alright, so now we are sort of going into like the magical realism of books. First up is The Wicked Deep by Erin, Ernshaw. I do think that this is one of the most slowest moving atmospheric books I've ever read. This one primarily follows a small sleepy town in Oregon that is primarily cursed, where every year the souls of these dead sisters return to take revenge on this town. I think the writing here was just the strongest suit. Like if you're looking for something really atmospheric, hauntingly beautiful, and lyrical as well, this could be the book for you. And the author herself also has a new adult book coming out, her first adult book, which I'm really excited for because it pretty much sounds the same as her previous books, but adults. If you know me, I'm a stickler for just atmospheric books with lyrical writing that have magical realism elements embedded into the book, so gotta love that for me. So highly recommend if you're looking for an atmospheric read. Next up is Echo North by Joanna Ruth Meyer. So this one was fantastic, and I truly think if you're looking for like a seasonal winter read, this would be the perfect book for you. I really loved how Joanna, the author, weaved all these different aspects of these different fairy tales all together into one book, and it was just so nostalgic to read. This book also has all the right sentimental elements it has for a Studio Ghibli movie. It takes place during a really cold snowy winter. It has a strange talking wolf. It has an enchanted castle underneath a mountain, a magical library with books turned into mirrors. It's just overall a really magical good time. If you're like a fan of Naomi Novik, Uprooted, and Spinning Silver, I think this would be another really great read for you. Alright, so the next book I'm going to recommend is Grey Wolf Island by Tracy Neithercott. All I'm going to say is that this is the most Raven Boy-esque YA book I've ever read. So if you're looking for like the same feel, the same elements that you read in the Raven cycle, and you loved it, this one follows a group of friends, and I love the relationships that they had with each other. They're basically going off to this strange island to find this treasure, but they soon find out that the treasure isn't really all as it seems. This book also has this essence of being really quiet, really slow, and really mysterious, and I love that in my books. Very on par with the Raven cycle. These group of friends also have hints of magic to them as well. Like there's a boy who was born to a virgin, a girl who can't sleep, a boy with mysterious ties to the island, and another boy who can foresee his own death. So this also has elements of magical realism as well. And I truly think it's underrated because I have never seen another person talk about this book aside from myself. So if you're looking for the Raven Boy vibes and aesthetic, look no further. Okay, so now we are going into the adult books, and first up I want to talk about is Real Life by Brandon Taylor. For this one, I remember giving it 3 out of 5 stars. I actually really enjoyed it and how it was a lot different from like the other contemporary literary fiction books that I have read. This one takes place over the course of one weekend, so it's relatively pretty short, but it tackles themes of like grief and trauma and how different people deal with that, and also as well as race, being a person of color in a predominantly white setting. It's about a young black man who is studying to become a doctor in like a southwestern university, so you can kind of see where that goes. But to me, the reason why I gave 3 out of 5 stars was because there wasn't really anything new that I learned about it or anything that I picked up upon. I did enjoy delving into these different themes that this book had to offer. This book is also very quiet, very slow as well, so you know we have a common theme going on, and I also remember this book being gay as well. We're also exploring that aspect of coming to your own identity, how you come to express that or how you come to internalize that, and I thought that was really interesting. It also explores a semblance of like a biracial relationship, but doesn't really go too much into that. Overall, I do think this is just like a quiet slice of life book. Not a lot happens in this book, but then again, not a lot happens in real life either. You know, just seeing the parallels in real life. So alright, so the next underrated horror book I want to recommend on this list is Hex. So I read this book a few years back, and this is one of the first horror books I've ever read. It was really unsettling, okay? There are some aspects in this book I really liked, and some aspects in this book I really didn't. So this one primarily follows a town that is cursed. However, there's a twist here. The town actually acknowledges the existence of this witch and the curse. Like they know who the witch is, they know why she cursed them, and they know what the curse is about. It's really interesting because this witch appears randomly in the streets, in chains, just appearing anywhere, even in anyone's house. She can basically appear anywhere, out of the blue, at any moment, and you just gonna have to get used to it. Another terrifying aspect of this witch is that both her eyes and her mouth are sewn shut. And everyone in this town knows that if her eyes or her mouth were to be open again, you could say that it would be literally hell on earth. I'm just gonna leave it at that. I thought it was just really fascinating and really interesting to see the townsfolk acknowledging and knowing what the curse was about. So if you're looking for a fun, unique, slightly creepy horror book about curses and witches, then look no further, because this book will put a hex on you. See what I did there? Alright, so the next book I'm going to recommend is a thriller, and it is Here and Gone by Haylen Beck. So this one to me isn't really your traditional standard straight up thriller. It veers off into sort of more of an action thriller than anything else. But let me tell you, the breakneck speed that I read and finished this book in the amount of time is just incomparable. I think this is like the fastest thriller I've ever read in my entire life. It's not that there is a lot going on, it's just that the stakes were so high that I had to just keep reading what happens next. Like, there's a twist in here that sounds really generic, but it truly delivers in like the best way possible. Just to give you guys a little smidge on what this book is about, it's about this young mother who's traveling with her 2 children away from her abusive husband. However, while driving on this lonely stretch of road, she gets pulled over by a sheriff. He pulls out of her car a bag of drugs that she has never seen before, so obviously things are gonna go downhill from there. However, neither you or the characters in this book would truly expect what's to come. The worst of what's to come. I'm just gonna leave it at that, but this is truly one of the most fastest engaging thrillers I've ever read. Honestly, I'm surprised even at myself because I haven't even talked about this book that much, but there you go. It's another recommendation. So, alright, so the next book I want to recommend, even though it's not that underrated anyway, Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. So this was a really fun and the least fantasy-esque book I've ever read. It takes place in a world that literally has no magic, which in a fantasy book is sort of unheard of, but it really works with everything that goes on in this book. So this book is about a couple who go on their honeymoon. However, the wife is kidnapped and the husband has to go into the Tower of Babel to try to find her. People just don't know how many levels there are in this tower in general. And so our main character has to go through each level. And in this book alone, close to 400 pages, we only go through like 3 or 4 of the levels of the tower itself. So we still have ways to go because this book is also a trilogy as well. What I really enjoyed about this book were the writing and the characters and the setting. It was just honestly so magical without it being magical in that sense. And the pertaining levels to this tower was just so interesting to read. Like, each level was basically a world of its own. We have our main character who at the beginning of the book is just unrelatable. Overall, someone we don't really care to read about. However, as the story progresses, as he ascends each level, so does his character development. So we're introduced to all these plethora of characters in just this world in general that's just contained. It's just so interesting because there's just so much going on. This is another book that I think Studio Ghibli could benefit from. It's just honestly so rich and exciting in of itself. Highly recommend if you're also looking for an introductory fantasy read as well. We have come to the last and final book of this list, and this is Poison Study by Maria B. Snyder. All right, so this is actually one of like the first fantasy-esque books that I read that was like sort of YA. I remember just thoroughly enjoying it. I remember this being sort of more mature than the other YA books that I read. Honestly, in of itself, this belongs in its own category because I feel like this was the baseline for a lot of like other YA fantasy books growing up. Like, this book walks so other books could run, aka Throne of Glass. So this was also one of the first books that I read because of BookTube. Little nice sentimental memory there. This essentially follows a young woman who is put in the dungeons in prison because she killed a man, and on the day of her execution she is given 2 choices. Either die or become a food taster for the commander. Obviously, we all know which one she picks. We follow her on this journey of becoming a food taster and the dangers that it inhabits. Honestly, just more drama and tea and gossip and political intrigue, and I have yet to finish the trilogy. Even though this also came out in like 2005, it's an oldie, but also a goodie. So, there you go. Alright, you guys, that is pretty much it for this video. Please let me know down in the comments below if you have read any of these books. Please let me know what you thought of them, or if you plan on picking any of these up. Literally, so many of you guys asked for a recommendations video, and so hopefully I delivered in that case. So, also, I forgot to mention, I don't know if you guys noticed or not, but my hair is now blonde. I have a new hair color now, but just going into 2020 as a brand new person. So, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you all soon with a new video. But throughout this whole journey, he sort of like, I'm just like mental illness. I'm just like mental illness. I'm just like the way I'm just like the way it betrays. I'm just like the way it betrays. I'm just like the way it betrays. I'm just like the way it betrays mental illness, drugs. I'm just toxic. More with a slight twist of thriller, with a slight with a slight twist of with a slight splash